Hi there, welcome to Therapy Minutes, episode 5. I wanted to continue today the series I started last week around sex addiction, and I introduced there that that's one of my specialty areas. I'm actually a certified sex addiction therapist. The acronym for that is CSAT, and I wanted to talk about in this episode the values conflict and the shame and guilt that come along with sex addiction and any addiction, really. Um, a lot of times I'll meet with a client who is struggling with their addiction, and what I notice firsthand that many people may not know about addiction is that for most people, there's a really strong values conflict. Internally, the person feels very incongruent, and it actually is what fuels the addiction in the first place. So if I'm in conflict with my values and who I am as a person, I'm behaving in a way that isn't congruent with my values, then I feel guilty about that. I feel shame about that. And sometimes that guilt and shame is so overwhelming that the person may continue to engage in the addiction because they're not sure how to deal with the guilt and shame. And a lot of times this can get overlooked because people think that the behaviors that addicts often engage in are so horrifying, are so hurtful at times that it doesn't often look like there's a values conflict. And that's part of the work of therapy and working through addiction is to understand getting back in touch with one's values and perhaps how far away from their values they were. But I think that a lot of times people outside the field or outside of the circle of addiction professionals or those people in recovery sometimes don't realize the guilt and shame that comes along with the addiction that kind of can fuel the continuation of that behavior. Not to mention that sex addiction has its own additional level of guilt and shame. Our culture and Western culture, there tends to be an additional taboo around sex and sexuality, and so that's even harder to talk about and confide in others about. So where a person has their standard level of guilt and shame just based on who we are as a person. We may have that from our own baggage and our own life experiences. And then on top of that, the cultural shame that comes along with talking about sex and sexuality can make it really challenging. So I always count it such an honor and a privilege to sit in the midst of someone sharing with me their challenges and their struggles around this issue. And I think that there are a lot of people who work with in a strong values context, perhaps clergy or other religious leaders, who often come into contact with people who are having this struggle, and it can be really challenging to guide folks in the right direction. And something I feel really passionate about is making sure that folks struggling with sex addiction are treated by a professional with training in that area, so that they can have some sensitivity around those issues. And so if you're one of those people who is helping guide folks in the right direction around decisions around their values or their sexuality, or just sex in general, maybe within their relationship, don't hesitate to reach out to a professional who specializes in that and just ask some questions. I know that I would be more than happy for people to reach out to me, for me to be a resource for the community and helping with that. And maybe the person might want to come into my office, and that's fine too. And if not, that's okay as well. There are lots of books and workbooks and resources out there that I'd love for people to know about, and that's one of the reasons why I do therapy minutes, is just to give little nuggets of information out there about addiction, couples therapy, sex addiction. That's the topic that we're on right now, because I got into this field because I desire to be a resource. I desire to let people know that there is help out there, whether it be from me or many other talented professionals in the field. And so I just wanted to talk about, just to give you a little clip. I could talk way more about the cycle of addiction and the guilt and shame and the values conflict that comes along with that. And when folks get stuck in that place of guilt and shame and feeling so low about where they are in relation to their own values, they often repeat the cycle. So when you find yourself wondering why someone would continue to, engage in these destructive behaviors over and over and over again, trying to look at it from that vantage point of how low they must feel in that moment. And hopefully having watched this therapy minute or maybe done some of your own research, you might be able to be empathetic towards that struggle. And that's certainly not a sign off on the behavior, that it's okay. My desire in working with clients is to help them get where they want to be, in line with their integrity, in line with their values, and to not live in that guilt and shame anymore. And sometimes it takes people a while to admit that. There's a lot of fear associated with that. And my hope is that my office and the office of many other professionals out there would be a place where people can safely confront that fear and work through the guilt and shame and live the life that they desire for themselves. So I hope this has been helpful in just beginning to understand. As we continue Therapy Minutes, I'm going to be diving deeper into a lot of these subjects. So if you're hoping for me to talk about a specific thing or wondering about a specific thing, please know there will be more. And I also welcome you to subscribe to the channel, comment below with what you'd like to hear or what you'd like to know. I'm more than happy to speak to what my listeners want to hear. I know there's a lot of people curious out there about what sex addiction is and what the resources are, and I hope that this can begin to be a platform for some of those questions to be answered. Also, don't hesitate to check out my blog at relationshiprecoverycenter.com. We are trying to keep that as up to date as possible with latest information and news pertaining to couples, families, and those struggling with addiction. So would love for you to check that out and see if there's anything there that can help you as well. I look forward to being back with you guys again next time on episode 6. And that's all of the Therapy Minutes for today. Thanks. Take care.